I need to talk about Pathologic. Notice that I did not say I want to talk about Pathologic. I need to talk about Pathologic. Pathologic has consumed me completely. I do not go a day without thinking about this game. If you're watching this video and you've played Pathologic to the end, you probably know what I mean. You're probably a lost soul like I am. It's hard to explain exactly why Pathologic is so special. I know, because I wrote a script for one single video to talk about Pathologic, and it's snowballed. As in, I apparently have a lot of things I want to say about this game. I'm not even going to tell you the word count for this script, it's that long. And the saddest part is, I can't stomach cutting any part of it out. That's how much I need to talk about this game. What started as the desire to make a single video has inevitably turned into a video series. But maybe I'm getting ahead of myself here. Part 1. What is Pathologic? In case you aren't familiar with Pathologic and somehow stumbled onto this video and still decided to keep watching, they seem like unlikely circumstances, but okay. Briefly, Pathologic is a video game about a town situated in the middle of the steppe being the grasslands of Eastern Europe, in an ambiguous country and an anachronistic time period. 3 healers arrive in this town, and they are all forced to grapple with a plague that descends on the city. They each approach solving the plague in a different way, and ultimately one of them makes a choice about the fate of the town. The healer making the choice is, of course, the one that you, the player, are currently playing as. You see, each of the healers is a playable protagonist with their own story. This is not the sort of game where you choose a protagonist and your choice simply affects maybe your stats and some dialogue down the road. No, each healer has a completely different journey through the town. A journey that sometimes intersects with those of the other protagonists, but is more often focused on the healer's personal plan for saving the town. In this way, Pathologic is really like 3 games rolled into one. Well, maybe more like 2.5, given that one of the routes was rushed due to limited time and resources, but we'll get to that. The 3 healers are the Bachelor, who is so-called not because he's single, although holla he is, ladies. I can't do it. But because he's a Bachelor of Medicine and an academic researcher. The Harrispex, who is from the town but was sent away by his father about 10 years ago to study surgery. And the Changeling, who is, magic? She has magic healing hands. Also, she was created by the Earth. You know what, we'll get back to that as well. All 3 main characters are introduced to the player in this wonderful and weird opening scene where they discuss their different approaches to solving the epidemic in the local theater.
Only a miracle can set us free without us having to destroy something. And I can do miracles. Just let me.
Will you please be quiet? You're a liar and a thief. Who is going to believe you when you keep lying to yourself? The truth is my shepherd. Whatever happens, I will find answers, and justice will be restored. I will perform the operation. Medica morbo adhibe.
Don't you go all bossy on me, clever clogs. You will act justly, but your justice will blind you and become his demise. This calls for the gentle hand of a surgeon. Step aside, both of you.
Yep, that pretty much sums them up. Each character has a particular ending associated with them, and my plan for this video series is to talk about the story of Pathologic with a specific emphasis on those endings. I don't know whatever clickbaity title I will finally settle on for this video series, but I can tell you what the real title should be. There will always be sacrifice in the end. How Pathologic uses the video game as a medium for storytelling by understanding the power of character perspective and choice. Yeah, that sounds much more pretentious than whatever is written below. My plan for this series is as follows. First, I'm going to lay out each character's story and ending, paying particular attention to the way the game uses character perspective, and how that affects the player's likely view of that character's ending. Then I want to fully discuss the endings and their implications for the world and its characters. And yes, I'm going to try to attempt to answer the age-old question that always pops up when you have a video game with multiple outcomes. Which one is best? Finally, I will well, resolve that question. I don't want to say too much about that now. You'll see when we get there. Before I delve right in, however, I want to say a few things up front. First, as I have already noted, this video series will primarily focus on the story of Pathologic Classic HD. The name is complicated if you're not familiar with the Pathologic series, but basically there was an older version of the game with a bad translation. Pathologic Classic HD is the newer version with the better translation and updated graphics. I will include a full summary of the different storylines, so if you've not played Pathologic, don't worry about it. I debated about making a shorter video that asked viewers to be familiar with the plot of Pathologic first, particularly because I have no idea if anyone will actually stumble onto this video, and therefore all of this work may be in vain. But the problem with that is Pathologic has an incredibly dense story. I think, if I remember correctly, it's something like 400,000 words. For reference, Hamlet is only about 30,000 words, and keep in mind that a full production of Hamlet takes about 4 to 5 hours. Pathologic is still a niche enough game that I feel most people who are at least passingly familiar with it, and therefore might stumble onto this video, know it through the zeitgeist, such as what I'm going to call the Big Three YouTube videos on the game. Those would be the H-Bomber guy, Pathologic is Genius, and here's why. Soul Matul's, well, sorry Soul if I pronounced it wrong, Pathologic Analysis, Themes of a Dying Classic, and Mandalore Gaming's Pathologic Classic HD Review. But because the story is so long and complicated, none of these videos is able to cover everything that I want to discuss from the game. Therefore, if you have not played Pathologic, I have you covered. And if you have played Pathologic, I'm going to try and make my summaries entertaining enough that you'll still want to stay along for the ride, though I totally understand if you want to skip ahead to the video where I really dig into the endings. I'll link that one in the description once it's finished. The caveat to all of this is that I am interested in talking specifically about the story itself. If you want a more traditional review that discusses gameplay, I will point you back to one of those Big Three Pathologic review videos. Each of these is excellent, and I should have links to them in the description. So with all that in mind, let's begin. Pretty much everyone who has played Pathologic agrees that you should play the characters in the order they are presented to you. That is the same order I'm using in these videos. So, first up, Part 2, The Bachelor and His Ending. Oh, The Bachelor. The Bachelor. AKA Daniil Dankovsky. AKA, as one character puts it, the prickly prick that will bury us all. As I mentioned earlier, Daniil is a researcher back at the Capitol. Specifically, he is an expert in thanatology, or the study of death, and runs a lab aptly named Thanatica. Daniil has arrived in the town because he received a letter from a colleague of his, Isidore, and here I'm going to totally butcher his last name, Burach. I swear I'm doing the best approximation that I can of the pronunciation from Pathologic 2.
Burach.
The letter that Daniil received invites him to come to Isidore's hometown to meet a man named Simon Kane, who according to Isidore has lived an extraordinarily long life. This is fortuitous for Daniil because the powers that be, the presumably nebulous government, are on the verge of shutting Daniil's lab down. Daniil hopes that Isidore is right about Simon Kane and that he will be able to use Simon to continue his research. Unfortunately, Daniil arrives at the Kane's residence to learn that Simon has been murdered. When Daniil goes to talk to Isidore about this, it turns out that Isidore has been murdered as well. There are rumors swirling around town that the murderer might be a man that they're starting to refer to as Ripper, who killed a bunch of people at the train station that morning, or possibly even the Shabnak-Adir or the Shabnak-Adik, which is a mythical steppe creature that takes the form of a woman. However, by the end of the day, Daniil discovers that the most likely culprit is actually a bacteria called the sand pest. The sand pest broke out 5 years ago in this town, and Isidore was able to create a cure for it, but now that he's dead and has taken the knowledge of the cure with him, no one quite knows what to do. The next day, the game informs you that you have 11 more days left in the town. In addition, food prices are now 10 times higher than they were the day before, as rumors of the plague have already begun spreading and people have started making runs at the grocery stores. Daniil consults with the governor, Alexander Saburov, about him taking emergency powers to control the food prices, but Saburov indicates that while he believes the plague is real, he will need proof to show the other two head families of the town before they will grant it to him. If you're starting to feel like, food shortages and runs on the grocery store and the government unwilling to act until incontrovertible proof of a plague is shown, that feels just a little too on the nose. Let me remind you that this game came out in 2005. Maybe there is such a thing as the Rat Prophet. Maybe he lives in Ice Pick Lodge Studios. Maybe Nikolai Dybowski is. Daniil can either get this proof by visiting Isidore's house and meeting his housekeeper, who he quickly realizes is already feverish from the plague, as are her two sisters, who reach out for you as you run out of the house. There is nothing Daniil can do to help them, however, and he's forced to abandon them. Or Daniil can fulfill a side mission to help set up a House of the Living, a shelter organized by the town's most charitable citizen, Laura Ravel. Daniil is charged with procuring food for the shelter, which is expensive and difficult given the current prices. Once he finally succeeds, he arrives at the House of the Living, only to be informed that this is a misnomer. Everyone inside is already dead. Either house serves as tragic proof of the plague, but even after all this work, Alexander Saburov still even forces Daniil to be his intermediary with the other two ruling families of the town, the Kanes and the Olgimskis, who finally agree to give the governor the emergency powers he needs to stem the prices in town. This cycle of Daniil finding himself unable to help the dying people of the town while he struggles to accomplish what little he can, while being hampered by the town's bureaucracy, well, get used to it. This is your life as the Bachelor. Let me give you the highlights of what I like to call Daniil's 12 days of endless suffering. On day 3, Daniil needs a vial of infected blood for the research that he and Ruben, who is Isidore's former apprentice, are conducting into creating a vaccine. However, local tradition specifies that only a subset of the kin have the authority to cut into bodies, the kin being the indigenous people of the steppe country. Specifically, this right is only given to the butchers, who are these Vulcan boys here, and to the Manku, families of healers with the birthright to cut open bodies. As such, Daniil can't even draw blood without getting shanked by the locals, and, you don't want to mess with the locals? Trust me. Yes, that is a woman being burned at the stake, why do you ask? Therefore, getting this blood involves painstakingly procuring the help of a group of butchers, who are all promptly killed by the overzealous guards protecting the plague district, and odds are that you will end up being beaten up yourself by even more guards once you finally track down the one body the butcher successfully autopsied, because you won't have enough money to bribe the guard to look the other way, as you literally just have to reach out and grab this man's blood. Still, Daniil discovers to his excitement that the blood from this infected body is actually no longer infected. It appears that the sand pest bacteria quickly dies without a living host. Perhaps this means it really can be combated with strict quarantine measures and a vaccine after all. You know, like in real life. Ah, Daniil, you sweet summer child. On day 4, Daniil visits with Vlad Olgimsky, who has been put in charge of forming an isolation ward and a morgue. Daniil also insists that a hospital be established, even though Vlad claims this will be unnecessary due to the fact that the plague kills everyone it infects. The initial locations chosen for the hospital and isolation ward end up being unsuitable because a townsperson who misunderstood how the plague is being transmitted sabotaged the local water supply. The only remaining locations that can be used are the theater and the cathedral, which have access to a local spring. Daniil is forced to evaluate all of these locations by himself, even though, as I will once again note here, it was Vlad Olgimsky who was put in charge of this. I should probably add a note about Daniil here. Playing as Daniil is, quite frankly, a ride. Daniil, as Big Boy Smart Brain, has a tendency to be, shall we say, sarcastic and dismissive in his conversations. There's a popular meme in the fan community, and here we go. Yeah, that pretty much sums it up. Navigating dialogue with Daniil is you basically elbowing him in his side and yelling no every 5 seconds. It brings to mind the children's book No, David. In case you aren't familiar, the book is basically a small child named David getting into trouble and being yelled at. That's it. That's the experience of playing as Daniil. Let me give you some examples. Alright, let's see. Talk to this guy. Yeah, who ordered the theater closed? Yeah. Oh. If I find out you lied to me, I'll have you hanged. Daniil, no! Alright, finally gotten to Yulia. Well, she talks a lot. Everyone has that ability. I don't know if everyone has the ability to make distinct events coincide. So tedious, Yulia. Oh my gosh. For crying out loud, Yulia, you are a mystic. Saburov is mocking me. Daniil, no! Why? Alright, I gotta go rescue Eva. And it looks like Andre's not here. Where's Andre? Why would he wait for a chicken? Coming out swinging, Daniil. Daniil, no! I'm gonna turn the theater into a mental ward, just as it used to be. Daniil, no! So this is one of the parts of the game where I literally cackled the first time I saw it. So this is Katerina Saburova. She is a clairvoyant, and she has visions about the future. Of course, Daniil does not believe that, being big boy smart brain, but she plays a really important function, which is to warn you that you will die if you don't complete the first day's quest. And, I love this. I'm clairvoyant. Thank you for your help. Daniil's just like, nope. You're clairvoyant. That's what you believe. We are done here. And you know what's really good, too, is when you play the Harrispec storyline, there's a part where Daniil tells Artemy that he should really go talk to Katerina about something. And then mentions he's not allowed to talk to her anymore. And I'm just like, Daniil, I know. Why did you have to go off on her? Just calm. Just chill the heck down, man. However, at this point in the game, I had the distinct realization that either I was getting used to Daniil's prickliness or his sarcasm was starting to make sense. When Vlad tells Daniil to go investigate the cathedral and the theater on his own, and Daniil wants to respond, "Are you completely capable of making even the elementary decisions on your own?" my response was, no, actually, yes. What he said right here. This is how bad the situation in this town is getting. I'm agreeing with the prickly prick. Also, this has nothing to do with anything, but I just have to note that investigating the theater leads to one of the 2 jump scares in the game. See this guy? He's a tragedian. He's an actor at the theater. So are these big boys, known as executors. Well, many of them at least. Other people in executor outfits serve as plague workers or administrative personnel because, it is no coincidence that the executor outfits resemble the old plague doctor clothes. When you go to get the theater key from the tragedian, he asks you to lead him out of the plague district, which you of course agree to, and at some point you will probably glance behind you to make sure he is following and see this. Why? Why? How does he walk like this? Oh my gosh, I love it so much. The other jump scare is, of course, coming up the stairs to Peter Stomatin's loft to see this. Peter. Why? Of course, this is the same man who, decided on this great room design. Is this bathtub even connected to the water supply? Peter, where is your bed? Do you sleep in the bathtub? On an even more unrelated note, I told you that I wouldn't talk about Pathologic 2, but they gave Peter 2 bathtubs, and I love it so much. There's one here, and then one on the outside. Presumably the outside one is for when you are so drunk you can't make it upstairs to sleep in your living room bathtub. Also, note all of the bottles in the bathtub. The trash can is literally right here. At any rate, Daniil finally succeeds at doing all of the Ogimski's work for them, establishing the theater as the hospital and the cathedral as the isolation ward, and he will likely attend the theater that night to view the mime performance. Oh, did I not mention that? Every night there is a trippy performance by the tragedians and the executors in the theater that comments on what happened during the day and foreshadows events to come. When you arrive at the theater that night, you see that it's filled with bodies. This, I might remind you, is supposed to be the hospital. But really, it's just become another morgue. There was something very hopeless about that, for me. On day 5, you learn that during the night, Saburov has abused the emergency powers that you granted him, authorizing mass arrests due to the increasing number of muggers and looters in town, even though those people are mostly hungry and desperate men. On top of that, the plague also infiltrated the jail overnight, killing most of the people detained there. You can release the remaining prisoners with an exorbitant bribe, or you can simply let them stay there and die. If the plague doesn't kill them, well, apparently the Inquisitor is arriving tomorrow, and he'll surely execute them then. In addition to these townspeople, Saburov's men also arrested your fellow protagonist, Artemy. I'm just going to anglicize it, Barak. Daniil needs to release Artemy so he can procure a live heart for his and Ruben's vaccine research, because while Daniil is still an outsider not allowed to perform autopsies, Artemy is a Manku, with the authorization to cut into bodies. Well, he's probably a Manku. It's a bit up for debate. However, the only way to rescue Artemy is to kill the people guarding him, either yourself or by paying the local criminal boss to put a hit on them. The last one you have to kill yourself, though. You try not to feel too bad about this, given that the guard just boasted to you about being part of the mass arrest, but if you're anything like me, you still kind of feel guilty. Artemy agrees to help you, indicating that he will be performing autopsies tonight anyways, and gives you a location at which to pick up the heart. He assures you that there are plenty of dying people in the district who can serve as donors. This seems fine, or at least it does at first. Completely unrelated to this, during the course of the day, Daniil may also become involved in a family drama involving a missing daughter. She has good reasons for never wanting to see her adopted father again, but she agrees to meet with you so she can talk to him one last time. The meeting location happens to be in the same area that Artemy says he will be working, and at some point during the day, you may realize that this is not a coincidence. Indeed, your worst fears are confirmed. When you arrive to meet the girl, you find that Artemy did not choose someone with one foot in the grave as he had promised to do earlier in the day. He chose the missing daughter. Well, you can't save her now. Your only option is to take the heart that Artemy has cut out for you and rush it back to Ruben. It is exactly what he needs. And he also tells you that he can read a person based on their blood. The owner of this heart was an extraordinary person destined for greatness. And the next day you see that in revenge for her loss, her father has organized a group of arsonists who began burning the infected in the streets. You also awake on day 6 to find out that during the night the plague infiltrated the isolation ward in the cathedral. Everyone inside is dead. Daniil spends the day testing the blood of various women the Saburovs and the Olgimskis point to as the plague carrier at fault, so Daniil can prove that they are all innocent. He never does identify how the plague got into the cathedral, however. On day 7, the Inquisitor arrives and starts mass executions. It's actually better than you expected it would be. You thought it might be one of 2 other Inquisitors, and it turns out to be a woman, actually, Aglaya Lilich. She's at least fairly reasonable. She informs you that the whole time you've been here, you've been spied on by the powers that be, which explains why they keep sending you these annoying letters insisting that you save the town even if it means sacrificing all of the people in it. You may also learn that the Inquisitor is related to the Canes, who are now your buddies because you're all a bunch of socially inept weirdo intellectuals. Aglaya asks you to set up a meeting with her niece, Maria, because she wants to reconnect. Maria is suspicious of her aunt, and you end up using subterfuge to arrange the meeting at the loft of Peter Stamatin, who's one of the architects that designed the Kane's masterpiece, the polyhedron. Oh, yeah, I haven't mentioned the polyhedron so far, have I? It's this insane tower here. When you arrive, you find Maria on the verge of tears because she was right. Aglaia never wanted to reconcile. She really only wanted to find out more about the polyhedron. But that isn't the worst part about Day 7. Early in the morning, Daniil receives a letter from Eva Yan, the woman who has generously served as your hostess throughout the game, even allowing you access to her entire top floor of her house to serve as a makeshift lab. Eva, for the record, sleeps in the corner of her living room. But on a more serious note, the letter he receives is strange and borderline incoherent. Soon afterwards, Daniil receives a message from Andrei Stomatin, Peter's brother and fellow architect, and also who happens to be an old college friend of Daniil's. This message indicates that Eva was taken by some worms. The worms, for the record, are members of the kin that look like this lumpy child over here. Daniil rushes to save her, and along the way, receives a second letter, this time from Clara, the third protagonist, the changeling. Content warning, by the way, for suicide. Skip ahead to the link in the description if you need to. The letter from Clara tells you that Eva threw herself from the cathedral balustrades this morning. But you know that this can't be, right? You and Daniil, you're on your way to help her. And yet, when you arrive at the location Eva is supposed to be, that Andrei promised she would be, you rescue Andrei. But Eva is not there. Heartbroken, Andrei tells you there was a mistake. The worms did take someone, but it was one of his pub's dancers. It wasn't Eva. Clara was right. Eva is dead. But hey, at least you find out that Maria Kena is desperately in love with you. Clearly the romance bells are ringing between the woman Daniil is weirdly paternalistic to, and from whom Daniil receives almost constant negging. For the record, this is the talk Daniil and Maria have right after Aglaia tells him that Maria is madly in love with him. Turns out Aglaia Lilich is your relative. I didn't know that. Yes, she is the younger sister of my lovely mother, and there is not a single person in the world who would hate my mother more viciously than she does. It seems like your mother's modus operandi must have led her to having plenty of haters. What do you know about it? Have you ever seen her at least once in your life? How can you judge? Come now, I didn't want to offend you. Are those tears in your eyes? And later on in the conversation, you are holding a key as if you were about to leave. Where to? Oh, no, I wasn't planning on going anywhere. And who are you to forbid me anyway? You're a bad liar. I think I'm going to tell your father about that. Oh, no, please don't tell Dad. He must not be disturbed now. Don't go there. He must not get distracted. Today is Memory Day. You're forcing my hand. I'll cure you of these whims. Ladies and gentlemen, eternal love right here. On day 8, the Inquisitor dispassionately informs Daniil that she has received word the powers that be have already destroyed his research in his laboratory. Yes, despite the fact that the powers that be had actually promised to help his lab in their many letters to him if he helped them with the town, they burned his life's work anyways. However, he's already far too embroiled in the town and the plague at this point to do anything but continue to see it through. He spends the next few days attempting to learn where the plague came from, getting the stuffing beaten out of him by a bunch of butchers in the process. Yeah, get him good! I swear I love Daniil, but the 100% normal reaction to playing as him is simultaneously having a soft spot for the man while wanting to bully the daylights out of him. It is one of the best and weirdest things about this fandom. Along the way, Daniil also learns more about the impossible polyhedron and the purpose it was created for, which is to preserve the soul of a dead person. Specifically, the polyhedron was built to house the soul of Simon Kane. Remember the man that Daniil traveled to the town to meet and who died right before the game even began? Yeah, that guy. The Kanes, and more specifically Maria, who was coming into her own as the family's mistress, a matriarch with the power of clairvoyance and a position that her mother Nina held before her. They have plans to build a new town around the polyhedron. Maria describes a perfect utopia, free of the disease. Daniil comes to decide that if anything in the town should be saved, it must be the polyhedron. The army arrives on day 9, and you find out that while Daniil and the Inquisitor have both been given instructions to preserve the town, the army has contradictory instructions from the powers that be to destroy everything such that no trace of the plague remains. The head of the military, Commander Block, turns out to be a reasonable man, however, and hopes to be able to work with you to find an equitable solution for the town. Nevertheless, the army is hit hard by the plague, and on day 11, Daniil is forced to take down a squadron of mutinying soldiers in an attempt to again save Andre, who it turns out was actually rescued by other associates in the meantime. Yes, I was beaten up, I was chased by dogs, I killed these rifle boys here with a knife, and I sniped all of these fellows only to find out it was all in vain. Thanks, Pathologic. On a related note, does a Bachelor of Medicine in Daniil's country require a firearms course? All I'm saying is that I buy Artemy being good with a gun, but this child right here, really? Have you seen his snakeskin coat? Daniil may also intervene in the execution of innocent townsfolk by the mutineers, arriving in time to save 4 of them, but finding out that he was too late to save the other 20 that have already been killed. Daniil also eventually realizes to his dismay that the Inquisitor has been playing him all along. See, the powers that be don't particularly like Aglaia, but they have agreed to let her live if the town is preserved. She has worked with Daniil to this point, to learn more about the polyhedron so she could confirm that destroying it would not harm the town in any way. And as it turns out, the polyhedron seems to be the source of the plague. The Kin's religion is centered around bulls, and part of their religious ceremonies, as well as their work for Vlad Olgimsky, includes the slaughtering of bulls in the abattoir, this huge hulking building that rises eerily out of the steppe. Based on information Daniil receives from Artemy, he surmises that this practice has caused the growth of pockets of underground bacteria. One of these pockets was punctured by the base of the polyhedron, and as the polyhedron has shifted over time like a lever, the sand pest has been sporadically released. Day 12 is the final day. If Daniil has preserved a small group of followers known as his Bound, which includes both the Kanes and the Stabatin brothers, he is allowed access to the cathedral, where a final meeting to decide the town's fate is being held between Aglaia and Commander Block. Block does not trust the Inquisitor, but he does trust Daniil as the town's resident researcher and smart man. As such, Block allows Daniil to choose what happens to the town. The choice that Daniil puts forth is, of course, to destroy the town itself, but save the polyhedron. The town will be plowed down into the earth so that no one will be tempted to settle there again, thus ending the plague permanently. The Kanes will then design their new utopia across the river where it is safe, with the polyhedron serving as the town's new focal point, similar to the abattoir's function in the current city. This seems very clearly like the right decision for Daniil. Daniil's research, his life's work, has focused on understanding and defeating death. The polyhedron is quite literally what he has been searching for, a means to preserve a soul beyond the expiration of the body. It's more than that, however. Daniil's route is not the most difficult from a gameplay perspective, but I think in some ways it is the most difficult from an emotional perspective. As I hope I have impressed upon you, Daniil has spent 12 days in a town in which he has been forced to battle against local traditions and the ruling families who, with perhaps the exception of the Kanes, maybe, usually seem more interested in sticking it to each other than in doing what is best for the town. And yes, Daniil did not necessarily do this out of the goodness of his own heart. As I mentioned, the powers that be promised that they would preserve his lab if he would stem the plague. Moreover, I'm sure that on some level Daniil wanted to stop the plague because he saw it as an interesting intellectual challenge. But I also think that Daniil often does not get enough credit for what he does over those 12 days. Daniil is responsible for the implementation of quarantine measures. Without him, food prices would have continued to rise out of control. The vaccine probably would not have been developed, and while it did not stop the plague, the vaccine did help prevent the entire town from getting sick. And Daniil did all of this despite being continuously treated as an outsider who has no place in the town. Moreover, even though Daniil is often accused of lacking compassion, even in this opening scene in the theater,
As for Brainy, he has no regard for casualties at all. Neither of you knows compassion.
on some level, Daniil does come to care about the town and the people in it. Daniil tries, even though he is sometimes hilariously bad at it, to reassure Eva that things will be okay as she becomes increasingly hopeless about the town situation. This conversation is filled with Daniil knows, but just look at the following. Do you know why our cathedral remains empty? Cathedrals are left empty when those who believe in everlasting life go extinct. You must be very clever. I'm slightly above average at best, so what about the cathedral? It isn't a cathedral, actually. It was supposed to become a cathedral, yet for some reason it didn't. Sometimes I feel sad for it. Sad? Seriously? I could have been living next to a place where sacrament is performed daily. And here my options are, anyway, I have to go. Or, cheer up, will you? Stop being depressed. If nothing else works, try to get some sleep or get drunk at least. Ladies and gentlemen, Daniil the doctor recommends sleep or getting drunk. But the saddest part is I can tell he's really trying. And I know this because if you exit the conversation and talk to Eva again, your standing dialogue for her now is, all hope is gone. Hope lives forever. Daniil is torn apart by her death. He doesn't show it often, but it's there. And he doesn't just show his humanity with Eva. Daniil also keeps Peter Stamatin from hurting himself when he starts spiraling out of control for fear that he will never be able to accomplish anything like the polyhedron again. In one side quest, Daniil intervenes when the Olgimskis come up with a plan to test the town's stockpile of medicine by using some of the town's most vulnerable women, instead taking the burden of testing the drugs on himself. He similarly stops a child who plans to test a Schmauder, one of the few known cures to the plague, by intercepting the boy before he can get infected, and by promising to complete the test himself. Schmauders are effective, but nearly lethal, and the children in the town indicate that they often work on adults, but kill kids, so Daniil probably saved the boy's life. Furthermore, Daniil continues to try and help the town even after his laboratory is destroyed and has no longer any external incentive to do so. Daniil is a prickly prick, to be sure, and you can definitely choose options that make him even more of a prickly prick. The way I see the dialogue in this game is that these are two different inclinations that the character is having, and you nudge them to either one side or the other. But that being said, he is not unfeeling. And the way I read his arc over the game, especially I guess the way I roleplayed him, part of the reason Daniil is drawn to the polyhedron is because, deep down, Daniil is an idealist. Yes, he wants to defeat death because that would be really cool, but I also think he really genuinely does want to help people. Daniil has trouble relating to individuals, but that does not mean that he doesn't care. It's just easier for him to focus on helping the many rather than the few. And not only that, but Daniil comes to the town with the desperate hope of saving his lab, and instead, the town crushes him again and again. Daniil is constantly faced with failures, with people suffering and dying despite his very best efforts. He even loses the one thing that he came to the town to save, which is his laboratory. In many ways, Daniil is a tragic figure. He struggles with hubris because he believes that he can defeat death someday, even as death mocks him at every turn of his story. Of course, Daniil is going to want to preserve the polyhedron. This town that he has come to care about has only repaid him in disappointment, often because of the small-mindedness of the people who cannot see the larger picture the way he can. It feels beyond saving, but the polyhedron, it promises a beautiful new world for the few remaining people left. As I came to the conclusion of the Bachelor's route, I really struggled with whether this choice is the best one. But being in Daniil's head, it feels right. It feels like maybe this really is the best thing you can do, to destroy the town, to get rid of the plague forever, and to start over. And then I played the Harrispex route. But let's leave that for the next video. which will be definitely shorter than this one because there was just a lot that I had to say up front about this game before I could start analyzing it and also talk about the other stories. Additionally, I also love Daniil. You probably got the sense for that over the course of this. Now, you know what? I won't apologize for that. It's not my fault that he feels so dang human. At any rate, thank you for watching this. If you have any interest in playing Pathologic after watching this video, and let me tell you, there is so much more to come, you don't even realize, do it. I'll leave links for the game in the description. Pathologic regularly goes on sale for less than $2 US, but frankly, even at its usual price of $13 US, I consider it a steal. I would definitely get it on GOG rather than Steam if you can, however, because that comes with the original terrible translation version of the game, which you can play for kicks, as well as the soundtrack, which is genuinely fantastic. I guess also like and subscribe, share with your friends. That's what people usually say on these videos, right? Yeah, the Rat Prophet wants you to like and subscribe. See you in the next video. Get ready to talk about Artemi Burach.
Burach.
Burach.